advocate at Lightning Labs, and I've been, in the Bitcoin space a while and obsessed with Lightning since it came out. So delighted to be here talking about it.
Yeah, hi, I'm Chris. I've been in this space for a long time, 2009, and my hobby became my job. So now I'm working for Blockstream on core Lightning.
There's one in the middle.
And I'm Matt. Sadly, Christian predates me a little bit, but I did get into Bitcoin in 2011. I have the illustrious claim to fame of I actually wrote the first payments channel implementation anywhere long before Lightning and before we had routing or in fact, bidirectional payment channels. And I don't think anyone ever used it. But
No, I did.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's good. You're the only one.
We had a student project working on it, so
Oh, all right. Well, good.
It was usable, so good job.
Thanks. I might have tested it once. So we're gonna talk very briefly about kind of the history of Lightning and how it's grown, and then we're gonna get into how we see it maturing and going from there. So I don't know if who wants to start with Hannah.
I'd love this one. I think the past year, just since I was at this conference last year and until now, like just watching the explosion in Lightning, and it's been really interesting to me to watch Lightning progress from, just a proof of concept where everyone's like, is this even going to work? To, then being very much in the hobbyist, enthusiast territory, where you're on the command line and, only people that are nerdy enough to be on the command line can use it, to then we get much more user-friendly stuff going on. And then now it's moved from hobbyists more into, businesses really attempting to use this in their products and services, and just been this huge explosion. And it's been really amazing to watch and think about where it might go from here.
Yeah, and I would go further and say it's specializing, right? So it's gone from hobbyists, but these still exist. They're still there. They're still running Pubnet, and it's still routing a lot of payments. And we have, so I now work for I guess Block is now our name. Not on CashApp, but CashApp now just deployed Lightning, and that's a whole different world. And then we just have the LSP panel, and the mobile Lightning world, and the LSPs also need a whole different set of things. So let's kind of split up the future of Lightning development by those categories, and then kind of dive in from there. So let's start with mobile. So we just had a bunch of discussion about LSPs and what they need, but maybe let's look more towards the future and talk about what do these mobile clients themselves need.
Yeah, and LDK is a fabulous tool for mobile. That's really cool. And we were also talking about the problems with mobile payments in Lightning, sort of an app having to be on, to receive a payment, which is a big issue at the moment, and then just trying to shove a Lightning node into a mobile application is certainly quite a challenge. But that's why, all the time, it's like, sorry, I'm just going off on this tangent, but it's like, I love that, I've spent so much time being obsessed with Lightning, and it's only been in the past year that when people come up to me and they ask me, hey, Hannah, can you do X, Y, and Z on Lightning? I don't have to tell them, theoretically, yes. I can tell them, yes, you can, and here's the library you should use to do that. And so that's been a really amazing change in the past year, but there's still this big issue with mobile payments that I don't know if any want to dive into that a little bit. But essentially, I think one of the problems there is just getting an app to, because you have to be online to have payments. And one of the issues there is just how do you get that app to be online to receive payments? And how do you solve that problem? And then shoving a node into a mobile application is no problem.
Yeah, I think we do see a lot of experimentation going on, especially now with regards to how do we want to integrate Lightning into mobile apps, into web apps, into whatever. And the experimentation we're seeing right now is going in the direction of, do we really want to shove a full node into a mobile app, potentially segmenting your funds across a multitude of apps, basically locking in the users into an individual app, so making it hard to experiment. Or do we want to have a more centralized node that is still operated and run by you, and where we just remote into it? And I think those are the trade-offs we're currently seeing explored, and we will see how these work out in the future.
Yeah, and we also see, like, we were talking about the online requirements. I mean, obviously, if I guess I can say this, CashApp's, like, almost all of their payment failures are just the app wasn't open. It was being sent to a mobile client, the app wasn't open, and they didn't get the payment because the app wasn't open. So having better logic there, and then enabling more, we've kind of seen this first generation of mobile wallets that all kind of have this simple, we took a Lightning node, or at least a payment channel, and we put it in an app, and we shipped it, and it works pretty well, and we have this LSP where our payments through it, whatever. But, we haven't gone down the route of like, okay, well, what if we have like a more server-assisted Lightning node, like Greenlight, like some of the other things Correlating is working on, and do we have better protocols for papering over this on-chain requirement, right? So I had that proposal, 6 months ago, and we're still long ways from implementing it, to use Onion messages as a base for doing payments such that you can kind of hide the fact that the nodes have to be online synchronously to receive the payment, and you can actually do offline kind of payments, but it goes out and sits pending, and then you can actually receive it without it sitting pending across an entire route across the Lightning Network and holding that capacity for potentially hours or days until the user opens their phone. So there's still, we finally have Lightning on phones, but we still have a lot to go to actually fix a lot of these UX issues that we've run into.
So I say that Lightning is now usable, like in production, in real services, but just barely.
Yeah, it's definitely not smooth, and there is a lot of infrastructure that we are working on, and I'm speaking for all implementations here, of course, not just Core Lightning. That where we are learning from the experience of operating Lightning nodes, of basically providing users with the ability to make more of their Lightning nodes, and these experiences will flow back into the spec process as well. And inform where the directions are going to go in the future.
It is going to continue to be interesting, as the amount of resources required to kind of maintain a Lightning node will only continue to grow as we have multiple different, completely divergent use cases for Lightning. We have, whether it's people trying to run it in enterprise and who want features that might help them, people trying to run it on mobile, and then you want to add like Onion messages and like Onion message mailboxes so that you can be offline all the time. All of a sudden you have all of these new features coming in that all the Lightning implementations, or at least kind of mostly need to support, or at least look at it and add chunks of it so that things can be interoperable. Just the amount of resources required to maintain a Lightning node is only going to continue to increase. It's already I think all the major implementations have at least 3 or 4 engineers full-time on it, and that presumably will only continue to grow.
Absolutely. So there is definitely a scaling up of the engineering side of things. But I do think that by us basically as Lightning implementations concentrating on a common kernel that sort of builds the basis for all of the applications that we build on top. And I've been often asked what sort of is the coolest thing you can imagine doing with Lightning, and I usually say that I'm not the right one to ask. I'm the kernel guy. I'm not the cool fancy UI guy. So, but I think that keeping that kernel small will help us basically provide a basis for whatever comes next, and whatever maybe these guys will build here. So
yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about mobile. Let's talk about kind of LSPs. Obviously, we just had an LSP panel, but what features in the Lightning protocol might be needed for looking towards LSPs, and what the future of development that we have to do on a lower level might be needed for those services over the next few years.
I think very much of the groundwork is already started with the Liquidity Ads, which is a way for you to signal the availability of funds and the readiness of allocating those funds to a channel that somebody would like to open. And I think that is sort of the direction that I would like to see things going forward, where we have an open marketplace where everybody can participate, where there is no mediator, where we can just exchange our interest in opening or closing channels and what the state of costs are for that.
I mean, I guess that divides LSPs a little bit even further, right? From service providers who might be providing service to hobbyist nodes or Pubnet nodes or always online nodes versus service providers who might be providing services to mobile, where some people might expect a user experience where your client accepts a zero-conf thing, right? But suddenly you need to actually know who your counterparty is. You can't just go to a liquidity ad and select whoever. You do actually have to have some counterparty you have some amount of trust in.
But I mean, that's very much part of the signaling, right? Zero-conf channels are basically just a feature that you can signal. Having an identity attached to a liquidity ad is something that you can use to basically make a decision of, hey, is this provider well connected in the network? Do I trust him to be a good counterparty for my channel? And that is basically just additional information that we have to convey to whoever might take you up on the offer. So I don't think that different protocols here are the solution.
So I think it is ultimately up to the people building the user experience, building the apps, what kind of UX they want there. Obviously, exposing different possible trust relationships to users tends to be a pretty poor user experience. Hey, you can pick between these nodes, and here's some information about whether you should trust them. PGP Web of Trust kind of failed for a reason. PGP is great, but the Web of Trust part never went anywhere.
Well, the average user, at least I think going forward in the future, right, the average user doesn't, want to know anything about what's going on underneath. So it's important to abstract that away for people as the Lightning Network continues to grow in use. But also with the different ways to do liquidity, again, there's different use cases and different users are going to have different, things they care about in gathering liquidity, and why do you need the liquidity? Is this a business that's accepting incoming payments? Is it a routing node? What's the use case? So it's just, things are getting just bigger and bigger. So it's, now we get little pockets of different use cases here and there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think in the medium term and definitely in the long term, one thing I'm really looking forward to the most is a proliferation of more different Lightning apps and different Lightning user experiences. And I think, certainly that's kind of our pitch, right? I mean, speaking from the LDK end, it's kind of our pitch of look, we're gonna do all the hard parts for you, and then you focus on how do you want to build a user experience around Lightning? How do you want to, do you want to have zero conflict with which nodes, and do you want to use liquidity ads, and do you want to use this or that, and whatever? And so, maybe I'm a little biased, but I'm looking forward to a world where we have some apps and some desktop clients or browser extensions or mobile clients or whatever that use Greenlight, and some of them that let you choose which node to connect to and expose this whole marketplace of liquidity ads, and some that extract a lot of that away, and then some that just always connect to your predetermined LSP or whatever.
Right.
And kind of this Cambrian explosion, I hope, is coming eventually, where we can have a lot of different options and we can kind of see what succeeds in the marketplace while all still having this common base of one of these Lightning implementations that's robust and tested and implements a lot of these features so that users can pick and choose kind of which ones they want. Kind of developers can pick and choose which ones they want.
And the more tools that are out there, the better to fit different use cases and all of this stuff. And it's, I also foresee sort of this explosion where I just imagine, 5-10 years from now, we'll be using Lightning, on the back end of quite a lot of different services, whether it's, buying things online, streaming things, authenticating for services, et cetera. So.
Yeah, definitely. So I definitely do share your sentiment that we sort of will have a common core that we can pick and choose from. With Greenlight, we chose to take a bit of a different cut, where you guys are doing an API level composition, basically. The thing that we want to do is basically provide a core node, hence the name, and allow users to basically then connect to it and experiment with different use cases. So we are going back to basically this topic of specialization, where we as the Lightning developers are sort of in charge of operating a Lightning node, the stuff that we do best, and freeing developers from actually having to even learn all of the intricacies of building both a beautiful UI and UX and managing a Lightning node that has to be bundled with your app. So, and hopefully by basically removing this need to bundle a Lightning node with your app, you're also freeing the user to basically experiment and jump from one front-end application to another one. And whereas if you bundle the node with the app itself, trying out a new app means setting up a full new node. So,
yeah, I mean that's always the kind of highlights that debate that's been around forever in the Lightning world of like, do you have, where do you put the node, right? Do you have kind of I would say the earliest designs and the earliest focus was kind of everyone would host their own node at home on a Raspberry Pi, and everyone would give kind of partial remote control access to that node to every app or whatever via, there's L&D has the macaroon system, and Core Lightning has some similar stuff. Now you can do it over Onion messages too. And you have kind of that world, and then you have this kind of movement towards, people actually seem to really like this UX of having a node, or at least having payment channels locally in Moon or Breeze or Phoenix, or maybe there's a few others. And then kind of maybe moving back, kind of the Core Lightning, the Greenlight design is a little bit in between, right? It's like hosted, but some of the signing is local, so there's less trust in the server. Yeah. Or, you keep it all hosted locally and do it. So I think, as much as there's value in there being a standard and everyone doing the same thing, I think we're just going to see different experiments. We're going to see different things. We're going to see people use Greenlight, that's going to be great, and then we're going to see people who continue to have the channels on the phone, and that's going to be great for those. So, well.
And we have by no means seen all of the possible combinations, right?
Yeah.
A Lightning node is very complex. It has very, very many components, and you can basically distribute these components however you want.
Right.
With Greenlight, we chose to have the node itself on a hosted system and the signer and the front end on a different device. Maybe some other combination makes more sense.
Yeah.
And we're just starting to see how these different deployment strategies can work out. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing how all of this works out.
Yeah. So we spent a little time talking about mobile, and then a little bit of time talking about LSPs and getting into this kind of mobile and server-assisted model. Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about what future designs and what future things have to come for the kind of enthusiasts, the Pubnet nodes, this world. What do we need to add to make that even better experience, and where does that world go in the next year or three?
Yeah, Pubnet is awesome, especially I think because they're just enthusiasts that test things out for us. They're just trying all the things, and then they report back. You go in the Telegram groups, and see what people are having trouble with, and it's fabulous, to have this group of enthusiasts that test things out. I think there's a lot of tools, for those enthusiasts, things like Umbrel and MyNode and all those sorts of things. And I think a lot of them want to, they get to sort of build with Lightning, right? And so when you make things that are really reliable, that they can just reliably use this to run their node or to manage their node and have these tools for liquidity, and then they get to experiment with building things on top of that. And that's really, really valuable, I think, to have that constant experimentation and testing in the space.
Yeah, I think there is a point to be made that we definitely need more tooling to surface some of the information about your node as well, to really have an objective measure on what works and what doesn't. For the longest time, we have heard that rebalancings work, rebalancings don't work. How much do you spend on rebalancing? Should we make rebalancings free? How much privacy do we leak with that? Do we even care about leaking some privacy if it's not our own payments? Or do we use rebalancings to provide cover traffic for really private transfers? So all of these kinds of details that we want to surface to the user to help them make an informed decision about whether something is for them or not is something that we definitely need to work on and make available to users in the future to help them make their own experiments, basically.
Cool. Yeah, I don't think I have very much to add here because this is the one market that LDK just, I think LND, Core Lightning work great for this market, so we don't really focus on it.
Focus on your market.
Yeah. So let's talk. We have a ton of time left, but let's talk really briefly about enterprise, and then we'll see if we can talk a little bit about spec in the future too. So what are we? We have a little bit of experience on the CashApp side, but what do we need for enterprises? As we just saw Kraken launch, CashApp only launched a few months ago. As these enterprises, big enterprises, start really coming online in a big way, what do we need for the next year for them?
This is, sorry, I'll jump in quickly. But I love this one because this has been the past year of my life. I've seen a lot of this. People are asking me like, okay, you get businesses that, need a really reliable service. Like, okay, we want to use Lightning, but we need something really reliable and, we are expecting this volume or that, and we need it to be scalable. And then just like, the amount of times I've had to explain to why you can't use Amazon Web Services horizontal scaling on like a Lightning node, like these sorts of things. Or I think scaling that infrastructure for some of these use cases is going to be something that'll be important in the next year or two as, bigger businesses take this on. And then just, reliability. If you're tinkering with something and it works 90% of the time, that's awesome. If you're a business and it only works 90% of the time, that's a big problem. So I think, reliability and scalability are big things for businesses that are trying to take on Lightning.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the prototypes we had internally for a long time is basically a system that is truly highly available for Lightning nodes. And Val recently published a system that very much looks like it, where you have a set of boundary nodes and a virtual node behind it. And that is definitely something that we are looking into because this reliability and availability is paramount for big businesses. Imagine that if Amazon was unreachable 1% of the time.
Right.
All the money they would lose by just not being able to process payments.
Or 100% of the time, they would still have a huge problem.
And this kind of innovation is something that we definitely need to look into. And we've come a long way. We very early on had failover. Eclair had an implementation of failover that could take 30 seconds to recover, if I'm not mistaken, which is good. I mean, 30 seconds, that's quite good. We can now basically reduce that to a couple of seconds failover, and with high availability setups, we can ensure that no single payment gets lost. Because if any particular node is offline at the time, the sender will basically retry it through a different route. And as long as any of these is online, then you can still process payments. And that also gives you operational flexibility, because it means that you can basically just restart a node or upgrade a node and do operational management of the node while still being overall available.
Yeah, that's something that we didn't kind of appreciate going into LDK. We kind of built this thinking about kind of the mobile world and thinking about like people who want to especially integrate Lightning into existing on-chain wallets. You want to hook it into your existing chain sync and your existing key store and blah, blah, blah. And that's kind of where we came at it. And then, CashApp came to us. We didn't pitch them really. We explained what LDK was, and they came to us and they said, hey, we want to use this. We have a ton of, CashApp's a little unique. A lot of Bitcoin exchanges are more kind of standard infrastructure, and they're set up to run a lot of daemons and interact via RPC. CashApp's not. They're a big company with, separate services for everything already in place that they already use for all of their existing web and whatever services. And so they came to us and they said, we want to use LDK with this. We think it makes sense. And so they ended up building a lot of that stuff using their existing platform, right? So they already had high availability stuff and failover and all that kind of stuff. So they built a Lightning node custom with LDK doing kind of all the Lightning specific stuff into their infrastructure and as a core part of their infrastructure instead of kind of having a daemon they talk to. And so then we have like the high availability stuff that we've shipped that they've looked at testing. Turns out once you start adding too many route hints in the QR codes just blow up, and so we need Bolt 12. We need the onion messages so that we can request an invoice, because it doesn't really you get too big an invoice for a QR code, or LN URL. I guess both work in that kind of server assistant setup. Yeah, so that's something that we didn't anticipate, but turns out LDK has worked fairly well for them, or at least they're pretty happy with it. So I don't know how to read this clock. It went to 0 and now it says 1 minute. But
yeah, it's going up.
Yeah, it's not 11:30 yet, so I think we can keep going for a minute. Let's take another minute and talk about the future of kind of the spec process, the bolts process. We talked a little bit about kind of having a common core and these things that all the Lightning nodes implement, and then having users kind of experiment using those different kind of building blocks that exist within Lightning. How does that fit into the future of how kind of the bolts evolve? And then there's now this new blip process to standardize some of these extensions. How do we see that process evolving over the next few years?
Well, I think we have to, see how it goes, right? We just started using, blips and all that, and I think that gets more and more important as we get more and more activity, and more and more innovation on Lightning. Trying to have a method in a process gets be very important.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we've already seen issues, things getting exposed to users where it's like, well, you want to receive a payment, okay. Now you have to pick, and you have to negotiate with the sender. Do you want to receive on-chain? Do you want to receive Lightning? And now there's, some apps have added, you can pick LN URL, and then you can pick Bolt 12, and like the user has to know these things, and they have to select the one that the sender can send, and like, so, there's a certain value to standardization, but then kind of how do we balance that with experimentation and letting people run wild, and we don't know what the answer should be, so how do we balance having a standard that people can rely on with enabling people to experiment and try new things so that we can find a solution that works better in the market?
Yeah.
So it's always been sort of this process of expansion first during an experimental phase, and then contraction as we learn what works best and what doesn't, and then followed by a new expansion phase. And that's been true from the very get-go for the Lightning specification. I remember when we first met in Milan 2016, we all had different implementations. We all were experimenting on different things. And we basically sat down and hammered out all of the different trade-offs and came to what now is the bolt process and the set of documents that we have for the bolt process. And so I'm pretty happy with the way it works. Basically, giving everybody the ability to experiment and then learn from
one who's ever expressed happiness about the way it works. I've heard people think it works poorly for very different and divergent and opposite reasons, but you're the first person I've ever say, oh, this works great.
I definitely have my pet peeves too, but overall the process works.
Well, I mean, we're building and things are getting built, so it can't be that bad, right?
Yeah.
But I'm curious, you're talking about this expansion and then consolidation. Where do you think we are right now in that?
Probably just about to start the next expansion.
Okay.
So with all the excitement going on, with all of the different use cases that are being presented, with all of the different ways to achieve the same thing, we are now sort of seeing what this will eventually look like. And from these learnings, we can then go back to the table and basically say, okay, this is the way we are going to do it because of these trade-offs that we've learned while experimenting.